From the imprints of water and time on western hills to the imprints of a heartbeat in a laboratory. From an inscription on a brick from the wall of ancient Babylon to the publication of a new scholarly journal in 3 languages. From training in the rhythmic eye movement of rapid reading to training in the musical rhythm of the kettle drums. From research in the sources of great physical power in liquid helium to the search for the source of unseen power in the life of man. This is Christian education at Andrews University Graduate School and Seminary.
As students, we look for a university where personal fulfillment and responsible citizenship are encouraged within the framework of a Christian faith. There are over 40 university buildings, with construction always in process. There's our new administration building and the rear of Seminary Hall. Though our library is the largest in our denomination, we still spend 10% of our total education budget for 1,000 new books per month. But the library holds records of only a few hundred years. The distant past is studied through imprints in the earth itself. The Geoscience Research Institute interprets such imprints within the biblical perspective for geologists, paleontologists, and biologists. On this western field trip were also college administrators, theology teachers, ministers, and the editor of the review. Leaves like these fossils from buried subtropical trees in Washington state are now found only in Central America. Corals from the Canadian Rockies are now found only in tropical oceans. A delicate tracery in stone was preserved by rapid burial. This was once a deep dinosaur footprint. Sand blew into it, making it solid sandstone and coal. It was found by a modern hunter following old dinosaur trackways in Utah. He wears a size 8.5.
Across the campus from geoscience and the past, graduate students from the biology sciences study the phenomenon of life now. A teacher from Illinois searches for red-backed salamanders and a frog for herpetology class. A principal of a West African training school trudges down a Lake Michigan sand dune to try for amphibians along the beach. At entomology lab, a teacher from Ohio goes to work on a cicada. Moth patterns include the emperor and the delicately tinted Luna. In the physiology lab, the polygraph apparatus picks up electronic impulses from the salamander heart and prints the story of living processes. For the details of cellular life, students use phase microscopy and the respirometer. Students in ecology study distribution, habitats, and seed dispersal. Graduate biology students have 20 other courses available, some outside of the United States. Our 2 Andrews expeditions to Peru brought back Peruvian birds for study: the paradise tanager, the motmot, the caatinga, Peruvian feather clusters, and many mammals which are now on display at the American Museum of Natural History.
Biology students come back from Peru at the same time we archaeologists return from the site of ancient Babylon. Dr. Horn displays the pitch on a Babylonian brick and Nebuchadnezzar's 7-line inscription. This 4,000-year-old brick from Ur of the Chaldees was stamped before Abraham's time. Such research has contributed to a more thorough knowledge of the Old and New Testaments. That's why this imprint gives us special pleasure. A grant of $20,000 to finance the first of 3 Andrews University archaeological expeditions to ancient biblical cities. Dr. Horn has already been digging at Shechem as a member of the Drew McCormick expedition.
To share such knowledge, Andrews University Seminary Studies was born 4 years ago, publishing articles from men of 3 races on 3 continents in the first volume. Professors and students now publish in many scholarly journals, from nuclear physics to ornithology, from literary criticism to biblical research. Faculty-authored books include both denominational and secular titles.
I believe the primary imprint of Andrews Graduate School is not on publications, but on people, particularly teachers, college, secondary, and elementary. We're interested in updating our mathematics. Regular National Science Institutes and postdoctoral grants at Andrews encourage a strong department with an international flavor. I'm an Englishman from Zambia, studying mathematics with a Chinese from the Philippines.
The Education Department offers graduates in business administration as well as seminary men the chance to increase reading skill and quick comprehension. The larger screen increases reading rate from 300 to 700 words per minute. Graduate education courses range over a wide spectrum. Superintendents and principals of public and parochial schools from Michigan to Ethiopia cram for an exam in school administration. Elementary teachers make visual aids for their first year of teaching. This teacher is qualifying for certification in secondary school home economics. The Andrews imprint on teachers includes weeks of supervised teaching experience. Practice teachers are often under the eye of a TV camera. The videotape is then rerun during counseling. The final hour for me, and for all of us, is the oral examination following the written comprehensives. Examiners Harder and Burrell question concerning concepts, and Dr. Akers probes for principles. Over 250 of us have successfully climaxed our year of professional study in education.
In music, the master's program stresses improved skill as well as teaching techniques. To find and encourage creative talent is the dessert on a teacher's menu. Of 70 graduate students in music, over 60 now teach in Adventist schools and academies, and 3 in the mission field.
In Mrs. Marsh's home economics classes, we conduct some types of investigations with rats. In others, we measure food to 1/10 of a gram for the Nutronaut special diet. Distilled water was their only indulgence. Teenage girls' response to the strict lacto-ovo-vegetarian diet was investigated jointly with the chemistry department under a $36,000 grant from the United States Department of Agriculture.
This apparatus is a workbook for testing electronic circuits in analytical chemistry. The vacuum line was designed by Andrews chemists for bromination of cyclohexene. Work continues under a grant from the Research Corporation. Another analytical tool is electron spin resonance spectroscopy. Crystallography, the study of crystals under a microscope, may identify traces of mercury or cobalt, or analyze copper ions, or study the property of birefringence. Liquid helium lowers the temperature of separated metallic isotopes of lithium 6 and 7 in a cryostat to minus 452 degrees Fahrenheit. The physicist checks resulting vibrations on the oscilloscope in determining mechanical properties of the sample. Lithium is polished in a dry box because it reacts to moisture in atmosphere. But life isn't all isotopes and cryostats. Some test the spring currents in the St. Joe River. But the next day they need a plow, not a paddle. When spring comes, the tempo picks up everywhere.
Exam time shakes up even political science majors. But they may soon join their colleagues teaching history in India, Cape Town, or Beirut. Dr. Tobiasen checks the manuscript of his new book, The Reluctant Door, on the United Nations right of access to the United States. At a supper for English tour members, Dr. Ogden checks 38 passports for the summer's 12-week literature course in England and on the continent. A graduate student shows films of a former tour. 22 masters in English are teaching in colleges and high schools, 8 working on doctorates.
For seminary men, spring is a time when study is difficult because new fields and new work must be planned for. In Seminary Hall, plans include Tanzania and Ontario, Costa Rica, Denmark, and Australia. Doctors Murdoch and Hilgert consider requests for pastors, evangelists, Bible teachers, and extension schools like this one in Australia. The theology faculty discuss promising students as well as theological questions. A Renaissance and Reformation major studies originals of the papal bull directed at Martin Luther and Luther's reply. A Latin Bible that influenced Luther shows a publication statement, 1492, the library's first incunabulum. The first book on the Waldenses to be printed in English, 1658, is examined by another student of church history. He finds on the map places he himself had visited on the Andrews tour of Reformation lands. Martin Luther, John Calvin, and other reformers had seemed very real at the wall of the Reformation in Geneva and at Montségur, meaning the pyre, where 212 leaders of the Albigenses were burned in 1244. The tour made an unexpected visit to our Adventist school in East Germany. At Andrews Library, William Miller's Hatbox and Prophetic Chart are among the interesting reminders of early Adventist history. Here also is Hiram Edson's manuscript concerning the disappointment.
Our expectations were raised high, and thus we looked for our coming Lord until the clock tolled 12 at midnight. The day had then passed, and our disappointment became a certainty.
Another imprint from early Adventist days is this picture of the 1888 conference at Minneapolis, and a picture of J.N. Andrews, scholar and missionary for whom the university was named. A letter from Ellen White reads, "I cannot but feel assured that you have found the very place in which to begin your schoolwork." The E.G. White manuscripts are kept in a vault. Here, Dr. Hilger goes in to examine the original handwritten manuscript of the great controversy. In the seminary chapel, stories of overseas evangelism precede plans for 9 field schools in this country. As one man shares past experiences, suddenly, a surprise. A new member he himself had studied with had secretly flown in to renew the many friendships formed through Bible study.
During the summer quarter, the pace accelerates instead of slowing down. This Dean's Workshop is one of 20 summer institutes, from languages to law. Deans get new books for young adults, material for worship talks, welcome exercise, and individual counsel on the MA program.
The Garland Apartment Complex houses many whose culture and practical faith enrich our campus. A business administration student and family come from Mexico, where this tray was painted, chiefly with the palm of the hand. Bachelors' sleeping and study quarters adjoin common lounges. A Finnish student's wife holds a knitting class for Seminary Guild members. Our Danny, Billy, and Bonnie Sue Smith enjoy our apartment before going to North Borneo with us. Purposeful young students help us appreciate the elements that unite us and find real pleasure in differing cultural imprints.
Husbands sometimes work at jobs like running a deal saw. They may do data processing. One continued to collect garbage until almost time for marriage in a pastorate. Wives do secretarial work, nursing, teaching in city schools or in the country. Mrs. Jasmine Jacobs taught second grade for 2 years before returning to Ceylon with a master's degree.
There's no use pretending that the Andrews University imprints have kept up with the needs of a changing world, even though our 47 doctorates on the graduate school staff come from 25 different universities. But we are working at it. 27 of these men have overseas experience. New departments of missions and cultural anthropology are staffed by men in whom faith and realism accord.
A graduate student may be flying solo as he prepares to pilot a mission plane in Central Africa, or he may be marching in a choir processional. Perhaps he's gathering pollen. or conducting an ensemble. He may be preaching in a nearby church while his advisor listens and then counsels. Or he may be reading a mindless calculator. Whether he challenges a teacher or an unwilling schoolboy, or listens to visiting speakers, or argues a point with a friend. If he revels in proof that he's made it, or packs up for the long trip home, if he laughs with a crowd at a banquet or worships with a listening ear, his citizenship at Andrews transcends national boundaries through the fellowship of a faith in a risen Lord and the imprints of his triumphant kingdom.